Pleasant good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be at in this part of the country. In any event, this is Entrepreneurship. My name is Curtis Brooks, and this is episode number 26. Wow, what a milestone. 26 episodes, and here we are, still going strong. We are talking about before you consider entrepreneurship. Think about these three things. I can't talk here. Again, the title of our show is Before Entrepreneurship, Consider These Three Things. We're going to talk about you. What must you consider? You must consider you first. And I know it is pretty general, but the reality of it is that there are lots of different things to consider. But I thought that these 3 points that I'm going to be speaking on will really just are just a kind of a summary or surmise of the discussion of what the 3 things that you need to talk about. I'm sorry here, trying to get my stream here together as well. But nevertheless, we're talking about before entrepreneurship, consider 3 things, all right? Consider these 3 things. And that is going to be you. The first one is you. You must consider yourself in this part of the process. And entrepreneurship is a process. It's not just about owning your business. It's not just about wanting to be your own boss. And those things are benefits and good and bad, but there are definitely pluses and there are some minuses as well. But as you are considering entrepreneurship, before you consider entrepreneurship, you want to think about you. Where do you fall into the whole schema of things in regards to what outcome are you looking for? And even much bigger than that, what are your clients looking for? What are your customers looking for? But before you can even get to your customer and knowing what your customer wants or your client, you must consider 3 things. And the first being yourself. You must think about you. You must know that in the process of you becoming an entrepreneur, you, my friend, you will change. And many times in life, and I would say 9 out of 10, that we start processes sometime, we go into business or have these great ideas, but we don't know how it is going to affect others down the line, if you will. And so as you are considering you as part of the process, leaping into entrepreneurship, you must think about the changes that are going to be made, that you're going to have to make, because you will make changes. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you'll have to make sure that your product, your service, and even before you get to the product or service, you want to make sure that you are fitting perfectly into the whole, if you will. Last episode, I talked about the round object fit into the hole, if you will. So you must make sure that you are fitting in the right place as it relates to you becoming an entrepreneur. Again, just one of the things that you and I need to consider. We must think about ourselves. We must think about the huge level of discomfort that we're going to be in. And to be honest, most of us don't think about those things because you don't think about those things until you get there. And that's the truth of the matter. We don't think about those things until we get there. And if I were to tell you how difficult entrepreneurship is, you probably wouldn't believe it, because your idea is so important for you to get out there on the market and build it or create it, put it together in some fashion. And that's wonderful. But it's still a process, though. It doesn't take away from the process. So you must make yourself a part of the equation. Excuse me. Take a drink of water here. Excuse me. Again, we must make ourselves part of the equation. Makes no sense to put together a product or service and you are not part of the equation. Meaning that how is it going to affect you? How are you going to, how are you affected by the very product or service that you are delivering to your customer or your client? So there has to be some changes. And in those changes, you, my friend, you will be uncomfortable. You will learn more about yourself in entrepreneurship than you have ever learned. You will learn about people. You will learn about how much you and I are alike in lots of different ways. You will learn, obviously, the differences and of course, the similarities. You will learn that it takes tenacity. It takes building a strong net, if you will. And we're going to get into that because that's part of what I was working on this past weekend, actually, is building my net. Because once you have considered you, and again, that's a very general term because it takes you and I doing the work. In order to fit your service, your product, and even before we get to your service or product, in order to fit those items, be it 1, 2, 3, 4 different products you may offer or several services you may offer, in order to fit those products into someone's life, you, my friend, you have to be the very brand that you are representing. And we talked about brand in one of my other shows, and I can't remember that. Yeah, what is your brand and your story? And again, there's a distinct difference. So on one of our previous shows, we talked about your brand being different from your story, but yet there's a fine line. So there is a difference, and we have to make sure that our brand is represented. Our brand is part of our reputation. How do people see us? I don't want to get off on a tangent on it because that is absolutely totally important, your brand. But nevertheless, before we get to branding ourselves, we must make sure that we are putting across the right image. And as far as it relates to entrepreneurship, going into business for yourself, or even going in business with another person or a partner in business, you must consider yourself. You must consider the work that needs to be done. And again, this may not be a popular subject or discussion, but there is work that needs to be done in entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs have work, and I think entrepreneurs are some of the most brilliant people there are because we think ourselves out of situations. We think about things before we do them. At least some of us do. At least that's what we should be doing. But my point is that as entrepreneurs, I absolutely love being an entrepreneur, and I would not change it for the world. Has there been challenges? Has there been struggles? Absolutely. And I would be dismissed to say otherwise. The truth of the matter for me is that I love being an entrepreneur. I love thinking. I love creating. And all those things come into place. And most importantly, I love learning. This walk, well before I get to the customer or the client, this walk has been about me first. And as you take the leap into entrepreneurship or consider going into entrepreneurship, the first thing you want to consider is you. Are you willing to be flexible? Are you willing to bend a little? Are you willing to let down your guard? Are you willing to be vulnerable? These are things that you must consider. Because as you and I take that leap into entrepreneurship or have considered entrepreneurship at any time throughout our lives, starting your own business or becoming a partner. Hey, Tish, thanks for joining. Appreciate you. We're talking about before entrepreneurship, consider 3 things. Thanks for joining, Tish. Absolutely. And the first thing we must consider, as I mentioned earlier, is you must consider yourself. You must consider the need to be vulnerable as we pursue entrepreneurship. You're going to have to be vulnerable. You're going to have to admit your weaknesses, because the only way to fit the round peg into the round hole is that we have to make some changes. And in order to make those changes, we have to be vulnerable. We have to admit that, hey, you know what? I am not sure about XYZ. I don't know. I want to learn this. This is the direction that I want to go, but I'm not sure. And that is the most difficult thing to do sometimes. That is to admit that we don't know. It's different from being wrong, and though for some of us that's difficult as well to admit that we're wrong, but equally it's difficult to admit that we just don't know. And to some of us, that is the same as being wrong. And it's not wrong, or you're not wrong because you don't know. You're learning. This entrepreneurship thing or journey, it is huge. It is huge. And there are many different pieces to it. So the first thing that you and I must learn, we must learn about ourselves. We must consider. And again, there's not an exhaustive list of things that you must consider, because guess what? Our own background comes in as we pursue. It comes up as we pursue entrepreneurship. Our own personal challenges and struggles come up as we pursue entrepreneurship. It is a battle. And sometimes we're fighting, or a lot of times the fight is not necessarily with other people. The fight is with ourselves first. We are the first obstacle that needs to be overcome as entrepreneurs. Trust me, I can tell you about obstacles. I can truly tell you about obstacles, at least my own. And I know as we pursue our own journey, be it entrepreneurship as parents or just going to a job day to day, there are personal challenges, struggles that we are having to overcome. And they create themselves, or they work themselves in our lives as obstacles. And it's interesting enough because it's not until we decide to go to the next level, it's not until we have this brilliant idea and we start to put it into play, we start putting the people into place or writing different documents or creating different documents, we start making phone calls. It's interesting how all of a sudden it seems that life all of a sudden starts coming out the woodwork. Our own issues with other people who maybe they don't believe in you. Maybe they don't think that you can do it. And maybe it's just that we're sharing our ideas with the wrong people. Again, there's just so much to it. But again, I just called myself just summarizing it because, again, you is general. Thinking about yourself, considering yourself and the scheme of this journey as we take that leap into entrepreneurship, or we've considered entrepreneurship. Consider yourself. And again, it's general because there's so many moving pieces, parts to it. But you have to consider yourself, because if you don't consider yourself, you could be the very obstacle that prevents you from moving to the next level as you pursue entrepreneurship. And whatever your dream may be, whatever your goal or desires may be, you have to consider yourself first. And I know at times there are going to be people who come up, or these things that we felt that people have done to us, but it first becomes about us. It first becomes about us considering, how do we fit in this puzzle? How do we fit into entrepreneurship? I have a dream, I have a goal, I have a desire, but how do I fit into this? Because ultimately, once we have moved our own selves out of the way. And I don't even necessarily believe that we can completely move ourselves out of the way, because life is life and stuff will always come up, and it's just the way it is. And so I think if we can just wrap our minds around that and just take it one day at a time, truly take it one day at a time, we will be okay. But know that day by day, it is work, and be prepared to do the work, because first and foremost, it is about you. Well, before we get to the client or the customer, it's about us getting ourselves in shape. Because again, this is like getting into a ring, if you will, and prepare to do battle with the giants out there. There are lots of transformational speakers. There's lots of motivational speakers. And I decided to, guess what? I'm going to get into this ring and fight. And again, not a physical fight, but sometimes that's what it feels like. It feels like a physical fight, because this body of mine and this body of yours sometimes is just going through different things. It can be exhausting mentally, physically, emotionally. So again, consider you first. Consider yourself first, all right? And as we have considered ourselves, we moved into the next level. Now it becomes about your customer and your client or client, either or. But nevertheless, it's now time to consider your customer or client. And many could probably challenge that. But again, I believe that once we move ourselves out of the way, then can we consider other people. You can't give someone something until you have received it yourself. And that is just probably another show in itself, because many times, just real quick here, many times we're trying to give someone something and we ourselves haven't received it. So it becomes difficult to give them something, or at least be comfortable with giving someone something, and we have not fully received it for ourselves. So that is something, again, to think about. So that being said, as we have considered ourselves, we have been able to give to ourselves, we understand certain things, and we're no longer the threat to our progress, if you will. Because believe it or not, we as people, we can be a threat. We can self-sabotage our own situations, if you will, always saying the same stupid stuff, or at least don't know what to say, or just frankly haven't prepared ourselves on knowing what to say when those opportunities present themselves. So it is important how we can be instruments of our own creation, if you will. So again, we're moving into the customer client. So again, the second thing that you must consider, that we must consider before entrepreneurship, is the customer and client or client. So after we have moved ourselves out of the way, we're no longer a serious threat anymore. It's now time to think about the customer or the client. And this is where we are doing the research. This is where we're asking questions. This is where the research actually should have been done already, because interesting enough, while we are doing the work, while we have considered ourselves, we in fact are at the same time simultaneously considering the customer and the client. Because think about it now. We in fact are preparing ourselves as instruments to be used by the client. And I say use not in a derogative fashion or negative manner, but your service that you create, your product that you create, your service that you may offer. It is to be used by the client. So you somehow, my friend, you're going to have to shape, you're going to have to twist, bend, break off, and take away some things that don't go there, that don't belong there, to make them work for your customer or your client. It's important. Again, we have to consider us first. And before, or at least after we have considered ourselves, and again, we're no longer the threat, we have the customer and client or client to consider. And one of the things I wrote down is that how will your product or service serve your customer? You have a product, you have a service. Yes, you are working. Yes, absolutely, Tish. Absolutely. We're working for them. Absolutely. Absolutely. I apologize. Just seen your comment there. But yeah, we are absolutely working for them, Tish. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that we forget as entrepreneurs. And I'm completely guilty of that because even as a speaker and a creator as well, and I'm sure with you as same with you, Tish, as a caterer, you're creative as well. You have a creative imagination, and that being in a way of preparing food and probably other things as well. But as we are creating things, services or building products, it's important to remember that we in fact are working for that customer or that client. Absolutely. And the whole process of that, where we are, again, first considering ourselves, it's like going into a gym. It's like working it out first. There are some things in our own lives, individually in our own lives, that we need to get rid of, that are just yucky. And be it our attitudes, our disposition, our thought process, that it just does not fit into the whole, if you will. It does not fit properly. So again, there is truly just a lot of power in what you said, Tish, because we have to remember that we are working for that client. And before we can even think about working for that client, we have to go to the gym. We have to work on ourselves first. We have to get in shape. And that getting in shape could be physically, if you are a trainer of something, or if you are a designer, or again, there's so many moving pieces to this, because you want to make sure that you are presentable. Even if you are a caterer, it doesn't matter. People look at you as the brand, your product, your service. All of those things are important to them, and they should be important to us. So yes, we are working for them in so many different ways. And again, there's just a lot to think about. I know, again, I've just only summarized this discussion here by 3 points here. And again, that is you. That's what we've already talked about, you being the entrepreneur, the person who is looking into or considering going into entrepreneurship. Consider yourself. Work some things out that you know that's not right. And there are some things that some people just don't even have to tell you. Just get it together. Work it out. Because in the end, we are working for them, our customer. We're serving them. And your product, your service, and you as your brand, it has to be represented. You have a reputation to fulfill. And, even if you are starting out brand new, it doesn't matter. You have a reputation to fulfill. And that is that your brand, your product, and your service, they are working together as one. Your brand is one thing, and yet your product is another thing, and yet the service you offer is yet another thing. But collectively, they come together as your brand. How your customer, how that client perceives you. And we've already talked about that. And I just love that brand thing, that brand in your story. I absolutely do. And that's powerful in itself. But nevertheless, we've been talking about you getting yourself in shape, going to the gym. Again, not necessarily a physical gym. And that could be part of it as well. Part of the process as we are learning, as we are training ourselves, again, to be better business owners, better entrepreneurs, and just making ourselves available to learn, being flexible. Again, getting ourselves in shape mentally, physically, reading different books, listening to different podcasts, and finding out how other people have overcome different challenges. Because don't have life single you out and think that you are going through certain things by yourself and that you are the only one that's going through different things. That is a terrible way to think, because as my mother would always say to me, it's never all of anything. So you are never going to be the only one that's going through what you may be going through by yourself. There's always going to be, there's always going to be someone else going through the same challenges and perhaps has a different perspective on the challenge that you're going through. And that will be able to shed some light because, again, as you may have heard me say before, the only way that you can change your situation is to think your way out. That's the only way that we're going to change our situation. So that in itself, I could probably go on. But that being said, the third thing that we must consider is strategy. You have to have a strategy. How are you going to connect with your clients? We've already talked about you and me getting ourselves in that gym, that physical gym or that mental gym, that gym that where we just work ourselves out and we're just sweating and just making some changes, because even though this gym obviously is a physical thing, but I'm speaking figuratively and in a way that you must understand that it is a workout. It may not be a physical gym, but it is a workout. And your body is going to go through things. There are going to be some awful days. There are going to be some yet disgusting days. And it may or may not be about anyone else but ourselves. So get into the gym, work it out, prepare yourselves for your client and your customer, making sure that your service and your product are in line with what your customer is looking for. Remember, as Tish said, we are working for them, and we have to remember that. So we've got to make sure that we are presentable mentally, physically, and emotionally, okay? All right? And thirdly, talking about strategy. You must have a strategy. So as we have learned about ourselves, again, we're no longer a threat, or at least a serious threat to harm ourselves or anyone else. But as we have considered ourselves first, we now have considered the client. We have a product or service that is working. We need to have a strategy. That strategy needs to be related into, where are my customers? Where do I find my customers? And if you are a caterer, you may find your customers in some kind of restaurateur or something like that, or some kind of magazine or something. You may find yourself your customer on a social group on Facebook. Maybe entrepreneurs, other entrepreneurs who have started restaurants. That's a good way. Again, you must have a strategy. Begin a blog post. Start writing about what you're doing. Start writing about how important catering is to serving your clients. Wow, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. But nevertheless, those are things that we need to think about. Those are things that we need to just consider. You have to have a strategy. Okay, it makes no sense to go into the gym and work this thing out and yet not know why you're working it out, or have no reason for what you're doing and why you're doing it. So it is essential to do things with a purpose. So I'm going to the gym purposely to work out. I need to lose 5 pounds. I need to lose whatever the case might be. I need to be able to fit into this pair of slacks or whatever the case. But again, there must be a reason for why we're doing the things that we are doing. So it's important to know that strategy is absolutely essential. So another part of our strategy is having a website where we are collecting their emails, having a attractive a website. Again, guys, we have to remember, part of the marketing thing is colors. People love colors. I love colors. My favorite color is blue, like a navy blue. And interesting enough, blue is one of the colors that a lot of people find calming, and yet also effective, because people are drawn to blue because it's calming to them. So that's why Facebook uses the color blue. The color red is more kind of energetic. So as we create our websites, we must remember strategy, not only in finding our customer, but strategy as it relates to putting our website together. Email lists. So if people are visiting your website, have a opt-in form that they can sign up for. A free offering. I talked about that last week. Be careful of free, but nevertheless, free is sometimes what's needed to get people in, to attract that customer. And again, something worthwhile, obviously, some nice content. You don't want to just give them something with a few words on it, but something where they can measure by it. And again, some great content. So free can be absolutely important as we are trying to strategize and find our customer. Live streaming, such as what I'm doing right now, a Facebook Live event or Periscope. Those things are absolutely important to finding your customer, strategizing. Again, first, it's about you and I working it out. It's about the customer and client. And now it's about strategizing. It's about, where do I find my customer? All right. So website, that's all dolled up, pretty and nice colors, attractive colors to bring them in and make them interested in what you're saying. The content that's going to be on your website, any articles or blog posts you may create on your website, or separately a blog post. You can just create a blog post by itself. You can create a Facebook page as far as your services or products that you may offer. A lot of people nowadays don't even have websites. So make use of the products or services that are already out there that are free. And I mentioned live stream. I mentioned blog posts. I mentioned free offers. For instance, you may give them 10 things to consider as you are preparing your guest list for an event. And make sure that one of those things is catering. I want to put together an office party for my organization. And here are 10 things that you must consider. So that's something to think about. And then finally, networking, as we are like 2 minutes over, but networking, you must have a strong network. We never know how things and people are connected, guys. So as we are strategizing, we must remember to network. We must remember to open our mouths up and begin the conversation, create the dialogue. And as my mom would say when I was younger, is that a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And there's really no two ways to say that is that if we don't open our mouths and say, hey, my name is Curtis Brooks, I am a transformational speaker, and I do blah, 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 XYZ. And I'm also an entrepreneur just as well as you are, but this is my credentials, and it's like dating, and it's like, again, building new relationships, guys. Coming out of that circle that we're so accustomed to being in, and knowing that there are many more customers who are waiting for you and I. But we must first get ourselves together. We must then learn about our customer and client. Because ultimately, as we take the journey into entrepreneurship, it's about getting ourselves right for the big day. Getting ourselves together mentally, physically, and emotionally so that we can weather the storm, because the storms are going to come, and that's okay. But you and I have prepared ourselves for this day. And there is no storm in hell that's going to stop us from achieving our goal. Wow. Awesome show, guys. Guys, I want to thank you for tuning in. Again, my name is Curtis, and this is Entrepreneurship, episode number 26. And the title of our show has been Before Entrepreneurship, Consider Three Things. We've talked about you. Consider you. You are part of the equation. Secondly, consider your customer or your client. And thirdly, consider your strategy. You must have a strategy to get the customer and a client. Thank you, Tish. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Absolutely. So that being said, I am signing off. And again, Tish, thank you for being part of the show and everyone else who listened in. And much appreciated. Again, I'm signing off until next week, Tuesday at 11 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Central Time. We will be talking about, I'm not sure yet. It will be episode 27, and that's it right now. So again, episode number 27 on Tuesday of next week at 11 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. For now, guys, till then, we'll see you on next week. Ciao. Have an excellent weekend, guys.